What if I were to tell you that as a couples therapist, I get to see a lot of the somewhat mysterious psychological forces that shape all of our relationships, and that most people are barely even aware of these principles, much less know how to use them to their advantage? Now, some of these relationship psychology concepts you're probably aware of, like the Zeigarnik effect, which states that we are much more likely to remember and think about things that are less incomplete. Or the halo effect, which makes us much more likely to apply a whole heap of other positive attributes or to someone we find attractive. But there are so many others that can impact our relationships, like the phenomena of the misattribution of arousal, or the Barnum effect. I'm packing the next 15 minutes with relationship psychology facts and applying them to all 5 stages of a relationship. Psychology phenomena are everywhere, from your first date all the way through to long-term relationships. Knowing how these forces influence your relationship is a game changer, because some of them could be working against you, in which case knowing about them means you can avoid them. Most of them, though, can be used to our advantage to give us a bit of an edge when you're dating or even in your current relationship. I find these psychological concepts fascinating alone, but they're so much better when they're practical. So I'll try to help you out here with some input on making these concepts more tangible. But before we go there, if we've not met, my name is Oliver. I'm a marriage and family therapist here in Los Angeles, and I love helping people grow great relationships. I try and make a video a week, and most of them have a handy PDF download like this that you can get for free in the notes below. So if you appreciate that, hit like, comment, share. Hype, apparently, is a new thing. There are 5 stages that a romantic relationship goes through that I explain using the heart framework. I've got a whole other video on that I'll link to below, and you can check it out if you're curious about why most relationships end at the 3rd stage. And there's also a whole bunch of practical tips on where your focus needs to be on each of them from a couples therapist. So the heart framework is here: honeymoon, equilibrium, adjustment, reality, and teamwork. As we dive into understanding some of these really fascinating psychological effects and phenomenon that we should know about, I'll explain a little bit more about these stages of a relationship. The first stage is the honeymoon stage, and for the purpose of this video, we're going to include dating, but really it includes the initial stages of a romantic relationship where it's all butterflies and rainbows in your stomach, giddy excitement, and you can't stop thinking about them. The first psychological phenomenon we're going to explore here is the Barnum effect, which is sometimes called the Forer effect. And it's the tendency for people to accept vague, general personality descriptions as being uniquely applicable to themselves. So in 1949, Forer gave personality tests to students and provided them with supposedly personalized results, which were actually identical, vague statements. Students rated the accuracy of their personalized descriptions really highly, which demonstrated the tendency that we have to accept general personality descriptions as being uniquely applicable to ourselves. So what does this mean for relationships? Well, if you're writing a dating profile, there might be a tendency to use very general statements that could apply to anyone, like, I enjoy having fun, or I'm looking for someone that understands me. I mean, we all do. These are really vague descriptions, right? But they can mean a lot to you as you write them, but that's the bias at play. You're thinking that it's very unique, but anyone reading it doesn't actually get a sense of who you are. As we're talking about dating profiles, you need to know about the cheerleader effect. This is the phenomena in which we tend to rate people as appearing more attractive in groups than in isolation. So in 2014, researchers showed participants photos of individuals alone and people in group. They found that faces were rated as more attractive when presented in a group context compared to when they were shown individually, which supports the cheerleader effect. So when you are creating your dating profile, it might be worth including 1 or 2 photos of you with friends or family. Don't put this as the first picture though, because when someone sees it, they won't know who you are. The mere exposure effect states that people tend to develop a preference for things merely because they are familiar with them. In the 60s, scientists exposed participants to very meaningless Chinese characters with varying frequencies. Participants later rated characters they had seen more often as likable, even though they couldn't recognize them. So what does that mean for you? Well, for me, it means that when you match with someone, make every effort to get offline and meet in person. As awkward as it might be to meet in person, you're lulling yourself into a false sense of security by continuing any online banter. So make a date, get things started in the real world, become familiar with each other IRL. Now, the spotlight effect is one for my socially anxious viewers because it refers to the tendency to overestimate how much others notice your appearance or behaviors. This is a piece of research from the early 2000s in which participants were asked to wear very embarrassing t-shirts and then estimate how many people noticed it. Participants consistently overestimated the number of observers who noticed the shirt, which illustrates the tendency to overestimate how much other people notice your appearance or behavior. So if you're on a date and you've got that voice of doubt whispering in your ear that you look frumpy or unattractive, remember the spotlight effect. Other people aren't noticing things as much as you. We all generally have a bias in which we think everyone is thinking the same thing as us, and they're just not. So as long as you think you look cute in your outfit, own it, work it, shake it. The Zeigarnik effect is a tendency to remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than the completed ones. So this research actually goes back to the 1920s when Dr. Zeigarnik asked participants to complete various tasks, interrupting some of them before they ever got completed. When people were asked later to recall various tasks, participants were significantly more likely to remember the interrupted tasks over the ones that they completed. I wonder if you know where I'm going with this. It means that your date will be more likely to be thinking about you after the first date if you keep things PG-13 and don't complete the task. Equilibrium stage of a relationship occurs when that anxiety and novelty of the honeymoon phase starts to wear off and things are a little less intense. Maybe you're 4 or 5 or 6, 7 dates in, maybe it's been a few weeks. The phenomena you need to know about here start with the misattribution of arousal. This is when we can mistake the excitement or physiological arousal from an external stimulus like bungee jumping for romantic attraction. So in the 70s, Professors Dutton and Aaron performed the famous bridge study, where male participants either crossed a very scary suspension bridge or a more stable bridge before interacting with an attractive female researcher. Those who crossed the scary bridge were much more likely to call this researcher later to ask for a date than those who crossed the stable bridge. They misattributed their physiological arousal that came from fear to attraction. So if you're using this in an evil way, you could probably plan a series of adrenaline-fueled dates and hope that your partner succumbs to this effect, but that would be a complete gamble and somewhat manipulative of you. I think it's a really good piece of information in the back of your head to separate out and understand what you're feeling and why. If it was a really adrenaline-fueled date, be careful, slow it down, go on another date, get more information. Reciprocity principle is a concept that's so important to understand and is also quite obvious. But people tend to reciprocate affection and interest when someone shows it to them. Professor Regan conducted a study where participants believed that they were evaluating some art in a gallery. All of the participants were assigned a partner who was actually part of the experiment. In half of the cases, this partner unexpectedly bought the participant a drink, and the other half of the people had partners who didn't offer a drink. It turns out that those who received the drink rated their partner more positively and were more likely to buy some raffle ticket from them later than the other half of the participants. So this is just a really simple reminder that if you're on a date, be generous, be kind, be courteous, and be curious. Your date will think more favorably of you if you do. I really want to underline the be curious about your date. People like coming to therapy because it's an hour in which someone shows them pure curiosity about them, asking them questions, being genuinely interested in their answers. It's a really fundamental reason of why therapy works. The pratfall effect is the principle in which people become more attractive when they show vulnerability or make small mistakes. So in the 60s, psychologists conducted an experiment where participants listened to recordings of a person answering some quiz or some questions either perfectly or averagely. Now, in some of the cases, the person was heard spilling coffee. And it turns out that people were perceived to be more likable after having an accident spilling coffee, while average individuals became less likable. So this means you don't have to be perfect on a date. In fact, it's better if you're not perfect. Now, obviously, it would be very foolish to deliberately make mistakes or spill coffee because people tend to see through that. But it does mean you can be more forgiving of yourself if you do. And this is a testament to vulnerability. Take a risk, open up about some of your feelings and some of your imperfections. It might go a really long way to making someone like you. The scarcity principle states that people place higher value on potential partners when they perceive them as rare or hard to obtain. Playing a little hard to get might make you more desirable. So this is the best kind of experiment that was conducted in the 70s because it involves cookies, or cookies in a jar. Participants valued cookies in a nearly empty jar as being highly valuable versus exactly the same cookies in a full jar. This is not permission to play games or pretend you're busy when you're not. You can't fake this, but you can take this study as encouragement to have a life outside of dating. And when you're in a relationship, the same is true. As much as you might want to spend every second of every day with your new lover, it's just sexier when you've got a life outside the relationship. In the adjustment phase of a relationship, the rose-tinted glasses have been taken off. All of those quirks you overlooked and any red flags you ignored are no longer hidden, hopefully. And you need to make a decision at this stage whether you can tolerate your partner's differences or whether you're going to break up. This is where the halo effect comes in. The halo effect tells us that we tend to assume that someone with positive traits like attractiveness has other equally positive traits like intelligence or kindness. And this is the stage in a relationship where that halo effect might start to wear off. Professor Lundy and Segal conducted a study where male undergraduates evaluated essays supposedly written by female students. When they evaluated these essays, some of them had photos of the authors, some of them didn't. The essays that were accompanied by photos of attractive authors were rated more positively than those with unattractive author photos or no photos, which demonstrates the halo effect on the evaluator's perceptions of intelligence and competence. And I believe since then it's been reproduced with female participants looking at male photos. So this is a very natural phenomena. And at this stage of the relationship, the halo might be slipping a little bit and you'll be seeing your partner in a different light. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it might be sad and you might be tempted to ignore what you see. But if you think about it, you'd probably rather make a decision now about your relationship and whether you can tolerate your partner, warts and all, rather than years into the future. Another thing to consider at this stage in a relationship is the Romeo and Juliet effect. This is where parental or societal opposition to your relationship can intensify romantic feelings between two people, often making the relationship feel more passionate and more intense. This was a study all the way back in 1972, and it was found that parental interference in an adult committed relationship was associated with higher levels of love and commitment. However, they noted that this effect tends to be short-lived, typically only lasting a few weeks or a few months. So a word of warning here if you're in the assessment phase of your relationship. Is your love for your partner based on grounded feelings of commitment, stability, emotional connection, or is it still a bit too lusty and intense? If you've got some haters in your family or friend group, you might want to slow things down to see if you're reacting to other people's opposition to your relationship versus your own feelings and intuition. And remember, if you want to find out more about passion, intimacy, and how they interlink with various stages of a relationship, check out my other video. I'll put the link below. The sunk cost fallacy is also at play here. People continue investing in a decision or a relationship due to the resources that they've already committed, even when it's no longer beneficial or satisfying. This was a study by Arkes and Bloomer, and they conducted experiments showing the sunk cost fallacy's influence on decision-making. In one of the studies, participants were more likely to choose a less enjoyable ski trip option simply because they'd invested more money in it, even though that investment was unrecoverable and the ski trip looked shitty. So that means that people stay in relationships because they may as well, or because they've been together for so many years or months, and they may as well just stick it out. It's called a fallacy because it's not true. It's just a mindset that people get stuck in. It's scary to be single, sure, but it's even scarier to have years of your life zip by because you didn't want to think this psychological fallacy through or take a risk and see what a new relationship is like. The similarity attraction effect states that people are more likely to be attracted to those who share similar attitudes, values, and interests. A recent-ish study from 2008 in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that people tend to form friendships with others who are similar to themselves in terms of values and interests. You're in a relationship because falling in love creates a bias in us, which we find things that we have in common with others. That is comfortable, that's attractive, that's part of what makes a long-term relationship. But for long-lasting relationships to continue for years, it's important to continue to find shared interests and do things together that you both enjoy. Stage 4 is the reality stage, and you reach this stage of a relationship if you decide you can live with your partner's quirks and differences. It means that your love is kind of maturing and you're committing to each other. So here are some of the famous psychological facts and phenomena to consider at this stage that might help you deepen your connection or perhaps prevent conflict. The contrast effect. People's perceptions are influenced by comparisons, making something seem better or worse depending on what it's compared to. So studies found that when participants' self-esteem was threatened, they judged others' intelligence more negatively, especially when comparing someone else's SAT score to their own. In contrast, those with boosted self-esteem were less critical in their evaluations. So if you are going through a stressful time, you are much more likely to see your partner in a less positive way. Stress can cloud your judgment and reduce your capacity for empathy, making it harder to appreciate your partner's positive qualities. According to research, stress narrows our focus, often making us more self-centered, less able to consider the needs and strengths of others. So if you're going through a rough patch with your partner right now, just take a minute to reflect on how much stress there is outside of your relationship. It could be that that is influencing your judgment on what's going on in your relationship. Confirmation bias is really important to understand at this phase of a relationship. It means that people tend to seek, interpret, and remember information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs or expectations, often ignoring contrary evidence. This research goes all the way back to the 60s, in which scientists conducted a whole series of experiments where participants were asking to test a rule by generating sequences of numbers. It just showed that people tried to find answers in what they believed to be true rather than the actual data. We tend to see what we're looking for. So if you have a thought or a belief in your head somewhere that men are untrustworthy scumbags, then you're going to find all the evidence there is in your relationship right now to prove that is true. If you think your partner is lazy, you're going to find and remember all of the times you spot them being lazy. Awareness of this bias is so important, and I encourage you to work the other way. Find times when your partner is helpful versus lazy. Make a point to thank them when you do notice that. Or make a list of all the times your partner's shown that they are trustworthy and write them down. You've got to do this to combat that bias in your head. The Pygmalion effect states that expectations placed on individuals can lead to improved performance, as people often try to strive to meet the expectations that are set for them. So in the 60s, Rosenthal and Jacobson conducted a study at an elementary school where teachers were told certain students should show rapid intellectual growth. And these randomly selected students actually showed significantly greater improvement in IQ scores compared to control group. Expectations can influence performance. So let's say a couple is going through financial stress. Partner A believes in partner B's ability to skillfully manage the situation. Just by expressing faith in partner B and their problem-solving skills, partner A says high expectations, and this belief actually motivates their partners to rise to the occasion, perform better, perhaps find creative solutions to their financial difficulties. The self-fulfilling prophecy is probably one we've all heard of. This is when expectations about a situation or a person can cause those expectations to come true, simply because they influence actions that lead to their fulfillment. So this goes all the way back to the 40s, where interviewers who believed applicants were less qualified behaved less positively towards them, causing the applicants to perform poorly, confirming the initial expectation. Something to hold in mind in a relationship is that positive expectations can actually boost your partner's self-esteem and their efforts. The self-fulfilling prophecy can play out when one partner holds certain expectations that then influence their partner's behaviors in ways that cause the expectations to come true. I know. So if partner A believes that partner B is emotionally distant, partner A will behave in ways that shows this belief, and those behaviors in turn cause partner B to actually become more distant, which confirms partner A's original belief. It does sound really similar to confirmation bias, but this involves someone's expectations actually influencing their behavior in a way that causes the expected outcome to happen. So if you believe your partner will be unfaithful, you might act suspiciously or more distant, which could push your partner away and lead to the very behavior that you feared. The final stage of a relationship is teamwork. This is an evolution in your relationship, turning it into a team. It means you can focus on building a meaningful life together, be it a family or a home or even community projects or business projects. The Michelangelo effect. Partners help each other become their ideal selves through support and encouragement. So a study I found from 1999 found that when partners believe in each other's potential and support one another's growth, they both move closer to becoming their best selves, which in turn obviously leads to healthier, stronger relationships. So this highlights how partners help shape each other's ideal selves through mutual support and encouragement, which leads to personal growth, obviously, and higher relationship quality. This effect suggests that when partners view each other in ways that align with their ideal selves and encourage behaviors that support these ideals, both of you experience personal development and relationship growth. An idea similar to this is the social facilitation effect. It means that the presence of a supportive partner can enhance performance in various tasks. So this actually goes back more than 100 years when Professor Triplett observed that cyclists perform better when racing together than alone. Almost 100 years later, this theory was formalized, and it shows us that the presence of supportive other people in our lives enhance our performance on simple tasks. So this effect can play a significant role in your relationship, where having a partner present can enhance your performance in everyday tasks or help boost confidence in personal endeavors. So if you are stuck, like me, figuring out how the hell to link your new Bluetooth speaker to the TV, ask your partner for help. You might be able to work through it faster if they're just around watching. The investment model states that the more partners invest in the relationship, the more committed they become to its success. This was based on research from the 80s that found that the more you invest in your relationship, the happier people are. I don't think I can explain that any more simply. So in the final stage of a relationship, things can become stale or complacent. And this principle reminds us that the more you invest in a relationship, whether it's emotionally, financially, or through shared experiences, the more committed, the more successful, and the more satisfying your relationship becomes. So the more you put into your relationship, the more rewarding it becomes, which leads to greater well-being and a deeper sense of commitment. All right, so we've reached the end of our relationship journey here, and I hope you found some of these hard-hitting psychological facts and phenomena helpful. And I hope you remember to use some of these in your relationships or dating, and come back for more if you're interested in growing great relationships.